I'm going to come clean with you folks. When I recently took a trip to Edinburgh, I didn't actually plan to make a video about Prince's Street. As a matter of fact, despite having walked past the site countless times, I had no idea it even existed. It was only when I took a ride on the tram that I noticed a hotel called Caledonian. Now, if you're a train nerd, Caledonian means only one thing: the Caledonian Railway. This was one of the largest railway companies in Scotland, probably best known for its express trains up the west coast to Glasgow. But they also had a terminus in Edinburgh, and that's what we're looking at the remains of. I feel like I've kind of given the ending of the video away there. Oh well. Let's do some non-linear narration and go back to the beginning. Edinburgh is, of course, the capital of Scotland, so naturally the Caledonian Railway wanted to get in here. In 1848 they built their main line that connected Edinburgh to Glasgow, on to Carlisle, and via the London and North Western Railway allowed passengers to travel all the way to London. The station they built was at Lothian Road. It was not really a worthy terminus for a great railway company, or at least for a railway company that aspired to be great. It consisted of one platform and a goods shed. This was fine in the short term, to get a foothold in the city. But something more would be needed. One idea was to run into Edinburgh Waverley, the complex of stations owned by the North British Railway. Now, in theory, this was not a bad idea. It would result in a single central station that could serve most of Scotland and an enormous range of destinations across Britain. The problem here, as with so many other places, was competition. The North British Railway were the big boys, the largest railway company in Scotland. They viewed the Caledonian as rivals. I mean, they kind of were, to be fair. But still, the Caledonian were, at least in theory, interested in sharing a station. And the civic authorities would also have preferred one big station in the middle of the city rather than two. But the North British just weren't budging. So the Caledonians shrugged and made plans to build a station of their own. So in 1850 they opened their new station at Prince's Street, very close to Edinburgh Castle. This was a magnificent structure with... Only joking, it wasn't that much better than the station they had before. It was built of wood and only had two platforms. Lothian Road was retained as a goods station. The Caledonian just didn't have the money for anything fancier at the time, and their policy was very much just build the thing, figure out the details later. For the record, the original plan was to build something much bigger to an Italianate design. Detractors nicknamed the new station the Wooden Shanty. In 1890, the Cali were finally feeling financially confident, and preparations were made for a newer, bigger station. This was actually helped by a fire that destroyed much of the original Prince's Street. By 1894, a new station had opened. This had 7 platforms, which was much more like it. In retrospect, it was probably for the best that the Cali didn't share Waverley. Waverley was a station that quickly outgrew its original design. 2 major companies sharing it would only have made things worse. Still, hindsight is 20/20, as they say. The station had a high glass roof over the platforms and carriage sidings to the west. But the early 20th century saw the addition of the most notable surviving feature: Prince's Street Station Hotel. This was built in red sandstone, which made it stand out against the grey stone of Edinburgh New Town. Cabs and other vehicles could enter the station via these gates here. I mentioned the Great West Coast Express trains, but Prince's Street was also a valuable commuter terminus for the western side of the city. In the era after the Second World War, Prince's Street would become a victim of irony. In 1948, the railways of Britain were nationalised, and British Railways, the new organisation in charge, wanted to streamline things. No, not like that. They wanted to make the railways more efficient by cutting back wherever they could and modernising the rest. Their feeling was that while Prince's Street was nice and all, it meant that there were 2 big stations very close to each other in the middle of Edinburgh. Wouldn't it make more sense for all the lines to share Waverley? Services in general were being run down, both from Waverley and Prince's Street, so it seemed that sticking them all into one station was finally practical. Waverley was considered to be better located, so Prince's Street would get the short straw. A connection was built between the line into Princes Street and Waverley in 1965, and that same year Princes Street was closed. Some trains were diverted to Haymarket, again not too far away. 5 years later, most of Princes Street was demolished. Oddly enough, the hotel was retained as late as 1981 when British Rail sold it off. It is of course still there, but now operates under the rather unwieldy name of the Waldorf Astoria Edinburgh the Caledonian. I mean, I mostly know the Waldorf as that place where the salad comes from. And that was the story of Princes Street. It was the largest station in Scotland to be closed, and now, sadly, there is relatively little to show that there was even a station here. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If so, then I'd be much obliged if you could leave a like, and if you'd like to see more on stations, closed or otherwise, you may wish to subscribe and hit the bell icon to be kept up to date on my shenanigans. I'd like to thank my donors on Ko-fi and Patreon for your generous support. You are the red sandstone to my hotel. And I'll see you all again very soon. Cheerio.